Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hot Seat with Cognizant Clay. I am your host, Clayton Terrio. Today on the show, we have David Shannon. He is a lawyer, a disability rights activist, an adventurer, and has even done some acting work. He has been honored with the Order of Ontario as well as the Order of Canada. I hope you guys enjoy this one. Hear you.
Okay, sounds good.
Little bit of a creepy voice. Well, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. I do appreciate it.
Oh, you're very, very, very welcome. Thrilled to be chatting.
Yes, for sure. So, well, first of all, how are you during this quarantine period?
Weathering the storm better than expected because other than a couple of times where I literally quarantined myself to go into my van and don't get out, you sort of drive around town. I've been at home, but I've also been trying to stay steady with friends, outreach to friends. I'm still working, and so every day there's stuff going on. I think that's been the key.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If you hear yelling in the background, it's just my budgie. He's quite loud.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So for those watching, you were unfortunately a victim of a rugby accident in 1981, which left you, unfortunately rendered a quadriplegic. Can you talk me through a little bit just the challenges you faced through that and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I mean, as you noted, it's been a long time. I think I've been really helpful with the core nucleus of support around me. I also think that and what I've seen for other folks with significant disabilities being able to navigate this is developing a lot of strategies, a lot of sort of creative strategies for navigating around inaccessibility. We continue to move the yardstick forward in accessibility and discrimination, but we know it never goes away.
Yeah, it really doesn't, and that's a shame. I think it has improved quite a bit, but there's still whole ways to go in a lot of areas.
Yeah, it is, and I think we've got to. I think that this recent pandemic has ripped the lid off of some other areas and exposed some much deeper concerns that we had hoped had started to diminish. But in particular, our access to basic health care, our access to in-home self-directed care, the very essence of what gives us autonomy and gives us that ability to be really free and independent in the community, is at risk when you see, for example, the triage guidelines that Ontario put out, and literally this document was entirely ableist, was not consulted with the disability community and said, quite frankly, we're going to have a meat chart where disabled people die first.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary.
It really is, and it shows how broken the system really is, right? I mean, it's a problem, to say the least.
A total lack of prevention, a total lack, and one of the areas is funding, but I think a lot of it is just sensitivity to prevention, health prevention, awareness, and then we've seen the triage guidelines. We've seen what's happening in nursing homes. And also what we don't hear so much about is in the individual homes and the denial of services. Well, people will sometimes go a couple of days without being able to even get a PSW to come in because there's staff shortages or fear and ignorance. It's a very, very, it's scary for the general public. Compound that tenfold for the disability community.
Yeah, for sure. And just going back a little bit, what were your aspirational goals as a career and in life before the injury?
Well, I knew I was heading for a university. I was 18 years old, and it actually happened while I was at university. So I knew I was heading into university, and And it hadn't solidified, but I already had a strong sense at that point that although I was doing my BA, and actually it was a BA in drama, or so BFA, I was heading toward a career in law or public interest advocacy.
Yeah, so it didn't change much. Maybe the motivation behind the disability awareness obviously came about because of that, I would assume, right?
It sharpened the focus, and I'm sure it detoured it a bit. I have a specific interest now in certainly disability rights, patient rights, health law, health policy. It might have been a more general interest in say, public health policy.
Right. And who during the recovery, who would you say inspired you the most to stay positive and keep moving?
Mm. A lot of it was self-initiative, but I would give it also, as far as the motivation goes, family and a dear core of friends. And they helped me to really stay positive, to stay included, to not give me a sense that pre or post injury there was really any difference in life. And those are relationships. My buddies from high school, my core friends, that I still stay really tight with. I was on the phone with my very dear friend today through the pandemic. We've been, we've been messaging and calling to everybody, and it's amazing that 38 years later, I can still say that they're dear, deep relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's big for a lot of people that have the core friends, is you can rely on them through the hardest times, and that's pretty important. I know a lot of my friends are just always, what can I do to help? And even through this pandemic, there's been countless of them that said, if you need me to drop groceries off at your door, or get you, some batteries, controllers, whatever it is, they're there for you, right? And that's, I think, very powerful.
And it's hard to ask sometimes, but there is a core group of really great people. I say also, as I headed through university and then through law school, there was some professors and other lawyers, other professionals who may not have been direct mentors, but you're asking as far as inspiration. They were certainly role models. None of them had a disability, but as far as how they conducted themselves within their profession, how they acted, their ethos, their sense of professional commitment, their ability to work as a team. They set an example as far as aspirations are an aspirational example. And I tried to, follow how they conducted themselves. Because certainly at that time, there's almost no one, except for one or two people, who may have, say, been lawyers who used wheelchairs.
Right, for sure. And you have your bachelor's and your master's degrees in law, and
yes,
you focus a lot on health, family, disability issues and whatnot. What made you want to follow the career in law?
In many respects, I was enjoying university. I was enjoying the experience of higher education, and law seemed to be a good fit. Advocating on major justice issues, the interpersonal relationships that develop through the law, knowing that it's a very broad skill set of advocacy, which could be one-on-one traditional litigation. It can also be volunteer work. It can be goodness, international development work. So it handed a lot of there would be a lot of tools in that skill set.
For sure. And what would be your favorite parts of the distinction you're in, and what is the most rewarding about, doing pro bono work with people with disabilities?
Well, of late, much of my work has been very focused under the Mental Health Act in the area of consent and capacity work, in the interface of patients, and how both law and policy within the healthcare system impacts on patients, or in other words, individuals who have disabilities and are and are within the medical model. And so certainly I had, after several months of rehab after my accident, that was a very impactful experience in my life. And so of late, working with people to try to help them maintain their dignity when at times they feel like self-control or autonomy is taken away from them, gives me a great sense of satisfaction and through that advocacy.
For sure, and that's definitely important, I think. Well, and I thank you for your work because it is very important. And sorry, were you going to add something there?
No, I just said thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. And just as a little side here, in the early 90s, you went to LA to focus a little bit on acting. You did a one-man show, and you were also on Divorce Court. Tell me a little bit just about what the experience was like going to Los Angeles.
Wow, that was a pretty wild time, and it's funny you asked me today because I was just chatting with somebody a couple of hours ago, and I mean it was a while ago, but I was chatting with someone saying this worries about sitting through this pandemic, and we heard about a break-in last night. And I said, oh my God, I was also in LA during the Rodney King riots. And you could, and there was a curfew. It wasn't a quarantine, but a curfew, and you could see the pillaging and down in the valley below. It was a pretty wild time, and it's brought back some memories as we've been hearing some stories through the pandemic of people doing break-ins and stuff at closed up small businesses, quite unfortunately and sadly. But for me, after law school. It gives law is a great discipline. It gives you much structure. As I said, it gives you a good skill set. But one thing that I was feeling after law school was potentially a little boxed in by that very structure. And there's one thing about going to LA and taking the acting courses. So there was courses in theater, television, and film that I was taking is a way to sort of start to burst out of that structure that I felt starting to, that box, literally. I was starting to find myself and easily, many lawyers easily stuck in, the box of litigation and the box of legislation. So for me, it was a wonderful creative experience to be able to take those courses and break that down and worry about, think about authenticity of the self and creativity. So for me, that was the probably the singular objective. And then out of it, it was just fun to be able to also write and through that creative process, write a one-person play and show it, and then do some auditions. And I was very fortunate to do some television.
For sure. Divorce Court was probably pretty interesting. Do you have any funny stories about that?
Well, one was we had rehearsed and we were set to go. Then all of a sudden, they added, without telling me, that I was supposed to get, playing a lawyer, this last minute surprise with this document that comes that wins the case. And I wasn't told until the person walked right up to me, and we had to all of a sudden improv because they just wanted to do everything on one take. It's rolling, and suddenly a guy's at my shoulders. I'm internally thinking, what the hell? But so that was just kind of fun and just one of those experiences for how on the need to be prepared to improv and have some fun. It looked like it went smoothly on the final product. So hey, I had fun with it. It was great.
Well, in LA, just what a cultural place to go, especially during the Rodney King riots. It was probably fun, but also almost a little scary with that going on.
Well, and it was a real dichotomy because there was that going on, but then there was, great people to meet, really cool stuff going on. Obviously, the weather is good. I loved Venice Beach and hanging out there, and so there's a lot of really, really good times, And definitely there's no limit on stargazing if you want to go see go see some stars too. But so it's it's a fun dynamic place, but at the same time there's this dichotomy.
For sure, for sure. I'd love to go there one day. It would be fun. So there's also in 1997 you did the David Shannon cross country tour of Canada, where you were the first quadriplegic to wheel across Canada in a powered wheelchair. Tell me a little bit just about that experience, and just to add before that, you said Thunder Bay was a very accessible city.
Yeah.
What made Thunder Bay such a good place for disabled people to live?
Well, coming right out of the 70s, they started to set up independent living. So that this is they had started what we now call SLUs or SSLUs. So there's independent living with self-directed 24-hour staff. There was also just the beginnings of self-directed program there, and it was very particular to Thunder Bay. Also, there was a couple of organizations, but one in particular that worked very closely with both the municipal leadership and the provincial bureaucrats and politicians to set up these programs, to set up parallel transit. And this is already by 1980 they were doing that. So they were way ahead of the curve for the rest of Canada. By the time I moved there, I was like, oh my goodness, this place is so completely accessible, comparative to the rest of the country. And especially at that time, my family was in Toronto, but Toronto was far behind.
Yeah, I find Toronto is still quite tough to manage. A few of my friends live there, and they're like my disabled friends, I should say.
Yeah.
And they say like the subway alone is just so hard to manage. It's terrible.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's it's a fun place to visit, but day in and day out, it's you've got a challenge with navigating everything for sure.
For sure. And what was it like to go across Canada? Like I could imagine there was troubles, but what was the experience like of doing that?
Oh, it was all consuming. I mean, it was tough, but what a high at the same time. I mean, seeing things, when you're only going 10 or 11 kilometers an hour, you're seeing things so up close that you'd never see from a vehicle, and from Newfoundland, the visions, the views of the water, and the hills, and the towns, and the relationships. Although they're very immediate and short, you're meeting such really interesting people, and it was amazing. The prairies are overwhelming in late August. Yeah, it was a constant just feast of experience, a feast for the eyes and every sense. Yeah, I had great time, and at the end of the day, meeting great people. So I hope it spurred, it injected good energy and awareness into the potential of people with disabilities too.
For sure. And did it feel, it was a 6-month journey. Did it feel long, or did it go by relatively quickly considering what you were doing?
It did go by super quickly. And when it was done, it was just like, holy cow, it had been so all consuming. It's like, what the heck happened? How did this finish so quickly? I mean, when you're in it, it's a big, long deal. But yeah, it was, when I think about it, it went so fast.
For sure. I could imagine it's long. Like you say, it is hard work, but you're doing so much that I think it just, the saying time flies when you're having fun is truly a good statement, I think.
Yeah, definitely it was. And, we had great supporters and to get us through. And I had to thank, the hotel sponsors and all that sort of thing. So we, it made a huge difference. And yeah, it was fun. It was a very different kind of fun, but it was, time did fly.
For sure. And you raised it. I think I read about $500,000 for, scholarships, grants, and stuff like that. What kind of reactions did you get from the people following you and the people you helped?
I've left, in my mind, it was a very, very positive experience. And I hope it was a two-way street. Um, and all of the folks, all of the folks met and supported, I think, left for better days. Now it's been a while, so I'm not sure, but I like to think that each one of these are really just seeds in everyone's personal journey to their own development.
For sure, and it's definitely, like you say, it's super self-rewarding, let alone everybody else. Like, I'm sure you're proud of yourself, because I know a lot of people are of you, for sure. But that was a really cool one. He's hilarious, so it was a fun one.
Oh my God, yeah.
So we were talking about we finished the question about the tour now.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch, so fast forward to 2003, you started the Together Ability Group, which to me is a big thing, because I would say I fall under the entrepreneur category.
Yeah.
The big one. I just wanted to know, what were some of the top business ideas from the people you worked with, and what exactly did you help the people with?
Well, what that was, we're trying to get off the ground was a national network of entrepreneurs with disabilities who could find a way to connect. Now there's new and fresher things happening in Southern Ontario, and I'm excited to see that things have taken root, and there's some good things happening now. Not good, if you ask me though, not good enough. But some of the key things we were finding was access to funding, access to startup loans, access to even the education on how to get a business plan and get things started were a monstrous barrier to people with disabilities. And that's really unfortunate, because I think in many respects the ingenuity of people with disabilities and the sort of dynamism is therefore lost, is inhibited, and that's a real shame. I mean, I think of myself as an entrepreneur. I'm a sole practitioner, and literally, my work, I provide a service. Service delivery is the product I deliver, and it's much more difficult for a person with a disability to go and explain to an employer through an interview process about accommodation and actually the great skills they bring to the table, as opposed to just starting your own business, because you are not only, I guess, the master of your own destiny, but in many respects, you know yourself best and know how to create that entrepreneurial environment around you in order to maximize your skills or maximize the gifts that you can give the world, as opposed to trying to constantly explain to employers or bosses who have no idea about disability what the heck you need, or what accommodations are needed. So I mean, if you're asking me what was I'd say the biggest barrier, and that was startups.
Yeah, I find it is hard. Like I called ODSP, and I'm trying to get the startup grant, and it seems like no one is taking the initiative for it. Now, I know COVID's going on and it's a little slow, but it's just so hard to start. That's the big issue.
Well, and also then, and also if we've seen the federal programs during COVID, you have to have a certain amount of payroll as a small business person, certain amount of payroll, and also something of a track record before you can even get some of the access to the programs. So many people with disabilities would fall under that. Under that margin, and therefore they can't get the support, that $2,000 a month support. They don't fall within the proper criteria in order to get rent relief. And so there's a whole host of programs announced, but the entrepreneur with a disability is not eligible for it.
Yeah, and that is really a shame. And And I actually started a GoFundMe page to get a new laptop and to get the equipment because the government just doesn't have that available. And it's been quite successful though. And I'm really grateful that GoFundMe exists because I've raised almost $3,000 now, and I'm actually going to donate some of it to charity because
Oh, send that to me, will you?
Yeah, I will for sure.
Thanks. Thanks.
So just improving or moving on from that, I should say, what advice would you give to a disabled person who's looking to become an entrepreneur or start a business?
Get two things. One is a very strong business plan, and number two, prepare after you prepare that business plan, meet with the funders. I found it better to work with banks and the more traditional business startup because they bring a host of expertise in the area of small business startup. Often the government, relying on the government programs and the bureaucrats to help you with, little startup grants, micro targeted, such as $4 or $5 grand. Well, that barely is enough to really get anything started, but you might probably exhaust yourself doing, for example, $10,000 work just to get a $5,000 grant from government. If you've got a good product and a good plan, work with bankers and some of the traditional forms of expertise. One, it builds the relationship with the bankers, and which you're going to need throughout your career. But two, they bring a host of expertise that really is. It's not that the bureaucrats don't have it, but they've got so many more regulations that tie them down. Stick with it. Keep putting that energy in and come up with creative solutions too, such as if you've got a significant disability, sometimes you might have to do some of the work from even like lying on your side if you've got a pressure sore or something, or, and so take advantage of the technologies, take advantage of, creative solutions, identify what you're going to need for staff. I think a really great help for me was very often, or almost always, the folks who brought a skill set as PSWs also were quite dynamic and still have been able to also be office support. And I don't mean just sit around the office doing PSW work. I mean really contribute with clerk, secretarial, marketing, all of the other tools that an entrepreneur needs to support, that any entrepreneur will need to support their business and get their business known. Think of the unique skill set of the support staff you're going to need, and find those people. So you're going to have to think in a very non-traditional way.
Yeah, and I think that is a key point, because there's two of my friends in the building. One's Stephen Call. He runs what's called Charter Ability, and it's a pontoon boat that's accessible. And he's actually, a lot of the people that help him are PSWs that used to work in our building. And they're very good at talking to people and helping with whatever they need. And the other one is my buddy John. They're both quadriplegic as well. He's actually been canceling all of his bookings during COVID because he has a friend that used to work here that can help take care of him without risking having multiple people in his apartment a day. So that's
very cool. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, and it's all those kind of original ways. And again, that gets back to the original point of we know ourselves best, and may as well define our world according to ourselves and what's best for us, as opposed to trying to let other people define it for us.
Exactly. And just moving forward a little bit here, in 2005, you were part of the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and you even worked with the Canadian government and the UN. What came about that project?
Oh, okay. Well, and I represented the it's now called Independent Living Canada at the meetings in New York, and what's really come about and is to have seen in 2006 the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities was passed, and of course that was passed by or signed on by, goodness, I think we've got over 100. There's over 160 countries who've signed on, and that was great work done by the United Nations, really, to have, to have been able to been a witness to it was really a real life-changing experience for me. It was a thrill.
Well, and that's worldly. That's quite incredible. Have you heard of Judith Human before?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, have you worked with her at all, or to come into contact with her at all?
I haven't. I think we met at that time, but she had about 1,000 people around her every day. You know, she was a busy person. I'm anxious to get her book though and read her bio.
Yeah, that's quite a phenomenal individual. Like even the Crip Camp movie on Netflix.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah, that was really good. I recommend that to anybody because it's really moving. It's emotional. It's funny. It's sad. It's everything in one, and it really shows how hard they really had to work to get rights for people like us because nobody cared. It seemed it was sad.
And those rights, we have to be ever vigilant to press for those rights. And it's brilliant that there's United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and now there's an Accessible Canada Act, and there's a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but we have to continue to press on because cracks open and it's easy to fall through. So we have to continue to identify them and elevate.
Definitely, and speak out about it because not a lot of people think to do it, and it's doing your due diligence as a disabled person is, that's why I'm doing this blog, to get, people like you and Rick Mercer with his work with people with disabilities, get those people out there because I think this is a very good platform of doing it. Yeah.
It's daunting to get that voice out though, eh? I mean, brilliant of you. A lot of folks, it's, it takes a lot of confidence.
I think so. And I find talking to the people is the easy part. The hard part is getting your message out. And also I find filming intros to my videos are harder than talking to the people because it's hard to speak in front of a camera. It is. It's very,
yeah.
And it takes a lot of courage. And even I interviewed Steve Dangle. He's a Leafs YouTuber. He's been doing it for 13 years. And he goes, I get nervous all the time. He goes, it's hard to keep moving. So the one major thing I really wanted to touch on was in April 2009, you actually traveled with your fellow lawyer and friend, Chris Watkins, to the North Pole. And you guys planted a accessible parking sign there. What was that like? I really want to hear about this because it sounds crazy.
You're right. It's crazy. Now especially during the pandemic, I keep thinking, oh man, I'd love to be in warm weather, not back at the North Pole. Well, we were very aware that 2009 was going to mark the 100th anniversary of the very first European expedition to the North Pole, and so many movies and there's so much folklore around the North Pole and South Pole, but about the difficulty and the challenge of getting there and if there's, other than the moon, the North Pole certainly has, it just has this sort of ubiquitous sense of barrier, of challenge, of individuals overcoming those barriers. And I thought, to hell with it then. 100 years after the date, which was April 11, we're going to go and we're going to plant an accessible parking sign. So that was sort of the inspiration behind it. To be there, though, again, like I was explaining in the tour in 1997, crossing Canada, it's the unexpected things that happen. It was, it was a great challenge. It was minus 55 at the time. Luckily, there's no storm. That was their version of good weather at -55. But I certainly triple layered and dressed for it, or quadruple layered, I think, and planting that flag. But a couple of the surprises. One was at an interpersonal level. We got close, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this guy comes cross-country skiing from. And he was from France, so we were with a couple of guys from Russia, ourselves, and then this guy from France comes up, and so we have the people. We're all speaking English, but everybody's from extremely different backgrounds. And, here I have a guy in a chair sitting on the North Pole with them. And what we end up talking about is kids and family and the various, it turned out to be a conversation with the very essential elements of our humanity and what really makes us family, which is, or makes us human, which is our connection to our family and the people we love. And it really struck me that however great the huge adventure is or whatever, it always has to take us back to our essential self. And I guess the other thing that was unexpected for me, because again, the video and film just doesn't explain it, as to when you're there, just how very dynamic the environment is. As you can imagine, it's a frozen ocean. So, I mean, we know the ocean is incredibly dynamic, but when it freezes, of course, there's great cracks in the ice, and the wind blows these, what would be the equivalent of sand dunes, but these dunes of snow, and the color is not a typical Canadian white snow. It's it's been there a long time, so it can be a little bit amber, and the moon and sun, because it was 24-hour sunlight, just hovered low in the sky. It was like being on another planet, really.
Yeah, it's almost like Mars or something. You just,
yeah,
and there's nobody there, considering how packed we are in cities and whatnot, right? Like, it's crazy.
There was just sort of no reference point for me, and then getting there was pretty cool.
And what was your main goal to teach people with that expedition?
It sounds a bit simplistic, almost naive, but any barrier can be overcome, quite simply. And planting that accessible parking sign was a statement of the disability community has come this far, and we're not going backward.
Yeah, no, it's simple, but important as well. It doesn't have to be wordy or a crazy idea. I think that's important, especially to teach a lot of young people with disabilities.
Yeah, and it wasn't a statement that, oh, we've achieved it, and now that's good, we can pack up and go home. It's not over, but it was a statement to say we have made it, and we're here. We're here.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so later in that year, on December 3rd, for the International Day of Disabled Persons, you actually tandem jumped out of an airplane from 27,000 feet, correct? And
yes.
So you really, as someone with an acting background, you truly encompass the term break a leg, because you broke your hip.
I did. Yeah. It was my upper femur. So I had to get a partial hip replacement after that. And, when you're parachuting tandem, the tandem diver is supposed to sort of land on his feet, and you're just in front. Well, we landed belly flop style. And so he splattered on me, and that's why I crushed my femur.
Oh, man.
That hurt.
Oh, I can imagine. What was the recovery like from that?
Well, at first I kept wondering what the hell's going on, because it was, like a broken hip or something. So when I get in my chair, it would be like I'm in traction, because my armrests are there. And then I was having trouble sleeping at night. I thought, oh my God, this is really weird. It's like I've got a UTI or something. Something is really bizarre here. And then And so luckily I made it back to Canada and got x-rayed later because, oh, geez, if I'd have tried to get that kind of surgery in the States, I would have been, I'd have been broke.
You probably would have gone bankrupt down there. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. That kind of surgery for sure.
Oh, for sure. And what was that experience like, though? Like, what is it like jumping out of an airplane? Like, I couldn't imagine.
Oh, geez. If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't do it. I'll tell you that. We went up so high and we had to be on oxygen. So the first time we went up with the group, the guy who was actually the captain of the team leader started to become hypoxic and he passed out. Luckily, the pilot was on separate oxygen, so he had to call in for an emergency landing and started to dive bomb back in order to get down to altitude so everyone could breathe again. But as he flew down, he tipped the plane so much, we all flew forward, and my oxygen tube flew out of my chest because I had a jet fighter, one of those jet fighter masks on. The oxygen pulled out of my chest, and I couldn't breathe. Luckily, I was on an intercom with my tandem diver. He asked if I was okay. I said, I can't breathe. And it was like the last words I had, and he shoved the tube back in. I swear another 10 seconds, and I was passed out. That would have been it. But stupidly, I got back in, and it was a total sense as we hit the door of the airplane, a total sense of shock and disbelief where it's like, this isn't happening, it's happening. This isn't happening, it's happening. And all of a sudden, boom, you're out the door. And I was like, what the hell? We're going. And from 27,000 feet, the ground's so small. It just keeps getting bigger. And it was just a matter of kind of at that point, breathe in, take in the moment. We were had heavy duty Velcro holding us together with Velcro belts. And that's when about halfway down on the intercom, he said, we're changing our landing protocol. And I was like, oh, at that point, what the hell? I talk about trust. I just said, well, we'll have to go. I'll trust in you. You've done this, the tandem diver, thousands of times, I hope, or it indicated he had. And ultimately, that led to the injury. But as far as the actual experience in the airplane, going to the door, making the jump, I swear it was really, really freaking scary.
Oh, I could imagine, but the adrenaline is probably just pumping through you.
Definitely. Yeah. It was, yeah, I mean, it's truly your life is in someone else's hands, and the adrenaline and just what it took to suppress the fear was wicked. And so
I think it gives you an appreciation.
Oh my God, yeah. But as I said, I don't think I'd do it again after the injury. But it was once. I had lived to tell about it.
Exactly, and I was reading the article about it, and it said, like, despite the injuries, it was as successful as it could have been, considering the problems that were going on beforehand.
Oh yeah, for sure. And to do it from that height was pretty. Actually pretty special.
For sure. I couldn't imagine. So I have this segment here that I do with my guests. I call it rapid fire. I go away from the advocacy a little bit and talk just a few random questions about you. So you are from Thunder Bay, Ontario. Who would you say your favorite person from Ontario is?
Favorite person from Ontario? I know it's supposed to be rapid, but give me a second.
Yeah, take your time.
Sir John A. MacDonald.
Hey, that's a good one. I like that one. I did a project on him in grade 5. There you go. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing to eat?
Well, I am a lover of New Orleans and a lover of the cuisine. Um, so really good étouffée.
That's a good one. I like that. French cuisine is always good,
Yeah.
too, right? I don't know. I'm sure you have been asked this before, but have you ever considered going to the South Pole for an expedition?
I have. I'd love to do that. And we almost did that one year, and then it didn't quite come together. So I don't know if that's in the cards. Also, there's a few more hoops because you have to get special permission from the government, and it's also a very narrow window of time to go. So that may be in the cards somewhere in the not too distant future, but obviously this year's out.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna ask too, do you like sports like in general, and which ones are your favorites?
Love it. You know, I've more recently become a bigger and bigger fan of baseball. I loved it as a kid, and then I was much more hockey, and I mean, as you can imagine, rugby. But yeah, baseball. I definitely. I'm a huge Blue Jays fan.
Blue Jays are good. Yeah, I've been to quite a few games. It's slow, but I find it's one of the easier sports to follow because
Yeah.
it doesn't go so fast that you miss something. For sure. And another one that I wanted to ask is, who would be your favorite band?
Rush.
Oh, wow. My dad's going to be proud of that answer.
Yeah, yeah.
My dad's seen Rush like 7 or 8 times in his life.
No way. Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the last question I was going to ask is, who was your idol growing up? Or who do you look up to even now? Whatever one.
As I was saying to one of the earlier questions, you know, sort of for me, it was a series of role models and sort of a role model by committee, you know,
Right.
one to look up to. I say the largest influence on my professional and personal life is my father. Um, and that would be, I guess, the largest influence on my life.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I think that resonates with a lot of people. Is your oftentimes if you're a woman, your mom, or you're a man, your dad often really influences your interests and also your life path in general, I think.
Yeah. Um, I mean, there's a lot of huge celebrities and sports figures, you know, that, um, you know, like Marlon Brando is my favorite actor. You know, those, uh, that's Jackie Robinson, my favorite athlete. But yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think just touching on Jackie Robinson, I think that's a major one for a lot of people. Like breaking the color barrier and going through what he went through was just sad, but also amazing how strong he was through it all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
And both he and then what Muhammad Ali did
yeah,
later.
I think Muhammad Ali would be definitely in my top 10 influencers, I would say.
Yeah.
And just a wordsmith and an overall funny person, so that helps.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, he was a savage though when he was boxing, that's for sure. So I just wanted to get back to the questions here, but so for your extensive advocacy and awareness work, you have been awarded with several honors such as, you know, the Queen's Jubilee, Order of Canada, Order of Ontario. What would you say is the one you're most proud of?
This one it's the Broken Nail Award. And that when I went to the North Pole, the Russians who were up there at their weather station, they had a Broken Nail Award. So they would give that to the person who sort of did the most difficult endeavor of I don't know if it was of the week or of the day. was a bent nail. It was kind of fun, and I got it when I was up in the North Pole. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, but as a Canadian, definitely the Order of Canada is the most amazing honor I can think of, and to have received that and feel that it's recognized for a contribution to my country. That's that would be the most. So the Bent Spike Award was perhaps the most endearing. The Order of Canada is the most magnificent.
For sure. Who gave you that award? Who was Prime Minister at the time?
Well, it was the actually Governor General.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Well, that must have been pretty cool. Well, just going to Parliament to get something from them is probably pretty cool because it, like you say, it's truly a Canadian award, and there's a lot of big people who have gotten that one.
Yeah, and be in that ceremony and the other people receiving it, or hearing what they've done and who they are. It was really an exciting day, and I was thrilled to very much just be a participant.
Right. Who else got awarded it that day?
That day, Haley Wickenheiser, Eugene Levy, one of the founders of Cirque du Soleil. So yeah, some pretty cool people.
Wow, Haley, that's a pretty relevant person right now during all the COVID stuff.
Isn't she doing great, with her her advocacy and her awareness raising and what she's saying? A lot of people. She has huge credibility, and a lot of people are listening to her.
Yeah, growing up as a kid, she was one of the people I looked up to because she put women's hockey at the forefront. I think she's a major factor in how far they've come.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. She's, what a well-rounded, gifted Canadian role model to all of Canada.
Definitely. And speaking of quarantine, a lot of things have been put on the back burner, and we kind of talked about the issues with the disabled community throughout this time. What advice would you give to people to keep raising that awareness even while everything's on pause?
Well, in many respects, we can see also the playing field's been leveled. We're pretty creative. We know we're pretty tech savvy. We know how to utilize everything from our power chairs to computers. A lot of this is just second nature to us, and the reality of being able to say, a remote office makes a lot of sense. Whether you're a quadriplegic or able-bodied person, I think now's the time to really be able to get up and say, no, this is a level playing field, and we can stay very dynamic. And in many respects, whether it's if you have creative passions such as writing or expressing yourself through blogs, now's the time to do it. Get out there. You've got this great opportunity. If it's connecting with friends you haven't been in touch with for a while, now you do have the time. I think it's a great opportunity. Then also for persons with disabilities, though, in all seriousness, to be very, very vigilant, because as I was saying earlier, it has exposed certain realities, certain very, very dangerous truths about how far the disability community still has to go, and how very important it is, as every individual person with a disability, how very important it is to manage your own health care. Don't let someone else do it for you. Obviously direct the services for personal support care, but don't hesitate. Don't be intimidated by seeking help from your physician. Don't hesitate if they ignore you or for some reason don't understand the treatment you need. You need to be the boss and the manager of your own healthcare now. And if we don't seize that time now, we may lose that forever, and almost we may be at risk to going back to the way it was in the 1950s or 60s, you know, when we didn't have our own voice, when we weren't able to, because other concerns, other priorities will take precedent. And I was saying, most scary of all, it was exposed by the published triage guidelines that came out by from the government of Ontario, but also the horror of what we've seen in nursing homes. I literally, I will, and it sounds edgy, but it was geriatric genocide, what has happened in those nursing homes. The refusal and the lack of preparation with PPEs for individuals in their own homes, so they couldn't get personal support services. It goes on and on and on. And then you compound that with poverty. You've got a toxic mix. I wouldn't even call it a perfect storm. The potential of a toxic mix that could, endanger the disability rights movement, impale and impair the disability rights movement. But it means that we, individuals with a disability, we've had to unduly bear the costs and the burden, as very often people who are at risk, the burden of the risk of COVID. We've had to burden the greater risk of further healthcare problems that are non-COVID, because we can't get supports in the community. And then we've gone and then after bearing all that risk and all that disproportionate burden on our shoulders, then we're told by these triage guidelines that, oh, we're not going to give you treatment. We're going to give it to the able-bodied person. We think that your life is not as valuable as the next person. That is stark, but it's real. And the most evident one in the media has been the nursing homes, but it's a very real current, and it's right there in black and white in those triage guidelines. So now is the time that we, with great seriousness, take stock of where we are at personally, where we need to go as a human rights movement, and also we cannot. Now's our time. We have to die on this hill and fight on this hill, or be consigned to perpetually living the rest of our life with ignobility now, an ignobility that people with disabilities in Canada probably have not had to live with for over 50 years.
Right, and I think it's a revolution of our times, because the ableism is so clear. You might as well have it in huge 100-print letters, because it's frustrating, and it is scary. You're absolutely right. It is, unless you are disabled too, you don't know what it's like. And I think a lot of the rules are made by people who have no experience with disabilities.
We are told you're expendable. And it really scares me, the messaging also coming from for example, the chief medical officer for the federal government, saying, well, it's the long-term care homes that are increasing the numbers of the numbers of COVID deaths. So if we really didn't have those long-term care numbers, then they'd be much lower. As if there's a differentiation. You know, a Canadian is a Canadian. A human is a human. We're all born with the same value within the human family. And to now start to splinter it is, I would say, the first step toward a eugenics type analysis. And that cannot exist in Canada.
No, it cannot, should not, and cannot at the same time.
And the leaders who actually are saying that in the media now, and they need to be called to task.
I think so, and it's hard to do that, but like you said, do the right thing, get the word out there now, for sure. And to just as a little side note to that, because I feel it really relates, you wrote a book called in 2007 called The 6 Degrees of Dignity. And can you just explain a little bit just why you wrote that book and what it's all about?
Well, the 6 degrees of dignity really put forward a six-part model toward how we might achieve equality and full inclusion for people with a disability. Whether it's through we need to improve the law, we need to improve a sense of self-esteem for people with disabilities, we need to improve policy, we need to improve attitudes. So it's 6 parts. And when I said 6 degrees, as we talk, thinking of the play in the movie, the 6 degrees of separation, is suggesting that we really are, all of us, connected by no greater than 6 degrees. The 6 people away from being able to connect with somebody. It's also saying it's a 6-part model, but it's so easily achieved. Discrimination, exclusion of people with disabilities, the devaluation of persons with disabilities just doesn't have to exist. It's really a simple formula to achieve full equality, and it shouldn't, and therefore discrimination just shouldn't exist.
Right, and I think that's a very important point to make, and I think a lot of people would get something from that book because it really is common sense, but common sense only comes with knowledge of the subject, and I think ignorance is bliss can only go so far, especially with the issues that are going on right now. And it's quite crazy how far we still need to go.
It's been shocking as I said, the lid has been lifted off through this pandemic, and had exposed a really scary reality that was always just very close to the surface, but hidden, and we do still have far to go.
We really do, and then we'll see. I mean, it's like you said earlier, moving the yardstick forward. As long as it moves a little bit, I wouldn't say every day, but a little bit, maybe on a month-to-month basis, then we're doing our job. But I think right now is our time to move it as far as we can.
Yes, it is. So again, if we don't move it now, at this critical time, it's lost forever.
Absolutely. Well, that's about all I have for you, David. Thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
It's been great chatting with you. Take care. You know how to find me, so love to